India and China are not friends, far from it. Since the deadly Galwan clash in 2020, ties have been defined by mistrust, military standoffs, app bans, blocked investments, and loud vows from New Delhi to cut dependence on Beijing through Atmanirbhar Bharat and strategic autonomy. Fresh border tensions in 2025 only hardened that stance. If you followed the rhetoric alone, you'd think India had practically sworn off China. But the trade numbers blow that story apart. Between April and November, India's shipments to China surged nearly 33% to $12.22 billion, even as Donald Trump imposed 25% tariffs plus another 25% over Russian oil imports. India's exports jumped anyway, east and west. So is this diversification-driven surge bad news for Trump's tariff war, or proof that India is gaming it? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Between April and November 2025, India's merchandise exports to China didn't just grow, they exploded, up nearly 33%, climbing from $9.20 billion to $12.22 billion. November alone delivered a staggering 90% year-on-year jump to $2.20 billion. Petroleum products, electronics, marine goods, oil meals. Indian exports are flowing east at record pace, even as geopolitical tensions simmer and military forces tear each other down across frozen mountain passes. This is not a reset. This is not a thaw. This is pragmatic economic disconnect operating in parallel with deep geopolitical mistrust. And it's happening at the exact moment Donald Trump is escalating his tariff war, slapping 25% reciprocal duties on India, another 25% for buying Russian oil, pushing some categories to an eye-watering 50% total. The contradiction is jarring. India never formally banned exports to China, true, but the post-2020 posture was unmistakably hostile. Quality controls on Chinese steel and dairy, production-linked incentive schemes designed explicitly to cut import dependence on Chinese electronics, pharmaceuticals, and machinery. Bilateral summits frozen until tentative gestures emerged at the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization meetings. Yet despite all of this, despite the border standoffs, despite the string of pearls encirclement strategy with Chinese ports in Pakistan's Gwadar, Sri Lanka's Hambantota, and bases in the Maldives, despite the China-Pakistan economic corridor cutting through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir in violation of India's sovereignty, trade not only endured, it accelerated with China. And here's the deeper irony. India's massive $99.2 billion trade deficit with China in the financial year 2025 hasn't disappeared. China still exports $113 to $114 billion worth of goods to India: electronics, machinery, solar panels, EV batteries, while India exports just $14.25 billion in return. So what's driving this? Is it opportunism? Is it necessity? Is India monetizing Trump's tariff chaos while maintaining strategic mistrust toward Beijing? And most importantly, India's exports to the United States also jumped more than 20% in the same month. So is this surge to China a loophole in Trump's tariff war? Evidence that India has learned how to outrun geopolitical pressure, or proof that in a fragmented global economy, economic logic can operate independently from political hostility? To grasp why this moment matters, context is everything. Trump's 2025 tariff regime was not subtle. It was designed to shock supply chains, punish defiance, and force alignment. The United States imposed 25% reciprocal tariffs soon after Trump's inauguration, followed by steeper penalties in select sectors. India was hit again with an additional 25% tariff for continuing to buy Russian oil, pushing some categories to an eye-watering 50%. China faced even harsher treatment, with tariffs on some goods rising to 145%. The expectation was simple: exports would slow, partners would fall in line, and China would be boxed in. Instead, global trade did what it always does under pressure. It adapted, and India emerged as one of the biggest adapters in the room. If tariffs were meant to choke trade, why are India's exports rising on both fronts at once? The April-November data reveal a pattern that is anything but accidental. India's exports to China opened the financial year at $1.39 billion in April 2025. They climbed to $1.62 billion in May, cooled during the mid-year months as global demand wavered, then surged again as autumn approached. September recorded $1.46 billion, October rose to $1.63 billion, and November exploded to $2.2 billion. That November number wasn't just higher, it nearly doubled the $1.16 billion seen in November the previous year. This was not sentiment. This was not diplomacy. This was demand meeting capacity. China needed inputs. India had them ready. And the timing could not have been more politically inconvenient for Washington. Petroleum products dominated India's export basket to China during the surge, reflecting a convergence of two structural shifts. China's refining appetite remained strong, and India's refining capacity had expanded significantly after 2020. Electronics followed closely, powered by India's growing assembly and component ecosystem feeding rerouted global supply chains. Marine products and oil meals filled niche demands. What stands out is not just volume, but composition. India is no longer shipping primarily raw materials like iron ore. It is shipping value-added goods that plug directly into industrial and export pipelines. This matters because it signals capability, not opportunism. Zooming out, the China surge fits into a broader picture of resilience. India's total merchandise exports reached $562.13 billion between April and November, growing 5.4% despite global headwinds. This growth happened during a period when many economies struggled to protect exports from tariff shocks, shipping disruptions, and demand uncertainty. It also happened as India navigated tense geopolitics with both China and the United States. The takeaway is uncomfortable for tariff purists. Pressure did not paralyze India, it sharpened it. The engine behind the surge is supply chain rerouting triggered by Trump's tariffs. As China-US trade flows were disrupted, Chinese firms scrambled to secure inputs from alternative sources. India stepped in as a supplier of intermediaries rather than finished goods bound for the US market. Petroleum products, electronic components, and industrial inputs flowed from Indian refineries and factories into Chinese systems that were pivoting exports toward Europe, Southeast Asia, and other non-US destinations. This is why the surge is best described as tactical, not strategic. India is not pivoting politically toward China, it is monetizing disruption. This is where the so-called China paradox becomes impossible to ignore. Beijing is importing more from India at the very moment Washington is trying to economically isolate it. On the surface, that looks like a contradiction. In reality, it exposes how tariffs reshape trade rather than stop it. China's increased imports from India do not restore its access to the US market. They help it serve other markets while absorbing shocks from American restrictions. India, meanwhile, strengthens its position as a flexible node in global supply chains. It neither replaces China nor aligns fully against it. It plays the middle with precision. Critically, this surge does not erase the structural imbalance in India-China trade. The deficit remains massive, hovering near $100 billion. China still accounts for roughly 16% of India's imports, while India's footprint in China's import basket remains comparatively small. The April-November surge narrows the gap slightly, but asymmetry persists. And that is precisely why the surge matters. It shows movement in a relationship long frozen in imbalance. Movement does not equal parity, but it does equal leverage. To understand how rare this moment is, history matters. India-China trade evolved from ancient Silk Road exchanges into modern commerce shaped by geopolitics and asymmetry. After border trade pacts in 2003 and China's WTO entry, bilateral trade ballooned from $2.71 billion in 2001 to $70 billion by 2016. But the benefits skewed heavily toward China. By 2016, China exported over $60 billion worth of goods to India, while India exported just $9 billion in return. This imbalance hardened over time. By 2023, total trade hit $115 billion. By 2024, it surged to $138.48 billion, driven largely by China's $120.48 billion exports of electronics and machinery into India's infrastructure boom. India's exports dipped 3% in 2024 amid global slowdowns, reinforcing the fragility of gains. That context makes 2025 stand out. The surge in exports to China is not about volume alone, it is about transformation. Petroleum replacing iron ore at the top of the export list is not cosmetic. It reflects India's post-2020 refining expansions and China's demand for refined inputs. Electronics growth is not incidental either. It is tied to India's emergence as an assembly and component hub capable of supplying rerouted trade. Marine products and oil meals filling gaps show specialization. Together, these shifts indicate that India is climbing the value chain even when the geopolitical environment is hostile. Geopolitics, of course, never disappears. Since the 2020 Galwan clash, India has tightened scrutiny of Chinese investments, banned numerous Chinese apps, and hardened its regulatory stance. Public sentiment toward China remains deeply negative, yet trade endured. Essential goods kept flowing, and by 2025, economic logic reasserted itself. Trump's tariffs added another layer of friction, particularly in steel and aluminium, triggering what many described as a US-India crisis moment. But instead of collapsing under pressure, India recalibrated. Trump's tariff strategy echoes his 2018 playbook, which also aimed to disrupt China-centric supply chains. That earlier round nudged companies to de-risk and explore alternatives. India benefited then through textiles and chemicals, while Make in India gained momentum. In 2025, history repeated itself at a higher intensity. Tariffs closed some doors, but diversification opened others. India's ability to absorb this shock while growing exports to both China and the US underscores a hard truth. Trade wars reward adaptability more than obedience. Nowhere is this clearer than in India's performance in the US market. Despite total tariffs touching 50% on certain Indian goods, exports to the United States jumped more than 21% in November to $6 billion. Engineering goods, electronics, jewelry, gems, and pharmaceuticals drove this growth. Several of these sectors benefited from exemptions, sustained demand, or competitiveness that tariffs could not erase. Services exports added another layer of insulation, reaching $35.86 billion in November. The result was not collapse, but balance. India's overall trade deficit narrowed sharply to $6.64 billion in November from $17.06 billion earlier. This dual surge, eastward to China and westward to the US, is the heart of the story. It reveals that India is no longer trapped in a single export dependency. Diversification is not a slogan, it is now operational. Trade agreements with the UAE, the UK, and EFTA countries reinforce this strategy, as do ongoing talks with Oman, Mexico, and others. The China surge fits neatly into this mosaic. It absorbs surplus production, keeps industrial momentum alive, and buys negotiating time with Washington. So, does this spell bad news for Trump? Only if success is defined narrowly. If the goal was to crush China's exports outright, the picture is mixed. China has lost ground in the US market but compensated elsewhere. If the goal was to force diversification away from China, the outcome is clearer. Global trade flows have rerouted. India has emerged as a beneficiary and an alternative. China's reliance on imported inputs highlights vulnerability, not strength. From this angle, India's surge actually reinforces the logic of decoupling rather than undermining it. Yet, perception matters. A 33% surge in Indian exports to China during a tariff war gives critics ammunition. November's 90% spike amplifies that narrative. It looks like circumvention. It looks like leakage. But the underlying structure does not support a claim of strategic defeat. India's exports to China remain a fraction of China's exports to India. The trade deficit remains enormous. The surge is demand-driven, tactical, and contingent. It is not a geopolitical pivot. For India, the lesson is blunt and empowering. In a fragmented global economy, flexibility is power. By upgrading export composition, expanding refining and electronics capacity, and spreading risk across markets, India has insulated itself from shocks that crippled others. GDP growth forecasts hovering around 7% reflect that resilience. The country has shown it can absorb tariffs, reroute trade, and convert pressure into leverage. Risks remain. An escalation in tariffs, prolonged WTO disputes, or a sharper slowdown in China's domestic economy could hit demand. But buffers exist. Services exports continue to provide ballast. Diversified trade agreements reduce reliance on any single market. The April-November surge is not destiny, but it is direction. Looking ahead, the implications are significant. If petroleum and electronics exports continue scaling, India's annual exports to China could exceed $20 billion. If US-India negotiations ease pressure on steel and aluminium, American demand could grow further. The challenge will be managing asymmetry with China while extracting opportunity from it. The opportunity lies in using this moment to embed India deeper into global value chains on its own terms. Trump's trade war has not produced clean winners and losers. It has produced motion. Supply chains are bending, rerouting, and reconfiguring. India's 33% surge in exports to China alongside a 20+% jump to the United States captures this era perfectly. Tariffs were meant to force choices. Instead, they forced innovation. And in 2025, innovation, quiet, tactical, and relentless, is where India appears to be playing its strongest hand. Thank you for watching Statecraft.